Kendall, thank you for being on the Difference podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
The statistic that suicide is the leading cause of death for men under 25. What does that mean for you?
Yeah, it's some of the statistics around suicide are horrifying, and not only that, it's the leading cause of death in Australia from 15 to 45-year-olds. So it's a huge issue, and I remember seeing that statistic for the first time and just being, absolutely horrified, and maybe I was a little bit oblivious to the stats around suicide, I think, until I experienced it on such a personal level. So, yeah, it's definitely a huge issue that needs tackling in Australia and the rest of the world, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So some people listening may have heard or seen some blue trees popping around Perth and may think that they're just an art installation, but they're actually installations as a part of the Blue Tree Project. Are you able to give us a bit of a summary of what that is and how you're involved?
Yes, so there are blue trees popping up all across Australia and even the world now. So the power of social media has certainly helped us spread our message with Blue Tree Project, and it's a very personal story of mine after losing my brother in 2018 to suicide, and it's inspired by a story that was shared at his funeral, a bit of a practical joke that he played once upon a time on the family farm in Muckenbuden, painting a blue tree with his friend, and we had no idea it was there. It took us many years to even realise this random blue tree in the middle of our farm. And yeah, it was just a special moment that was shared with him and his friend, and it was it was shared at the funeral, and many people hearing that story, it really resonated with them, and they sort of felt compelled to paint a tree as a bit of a tribute almost, or a bit of a memorial in a way. And in fact, it was one of my brother's best friends, Simon Comerford, and my cousin, who went out and painted the biggest, baddest tree they could find on the farm. And I think it took them like 2 days and 25 litres of paint. And it was, a bit of a tribute to Jaden that was shared on Facebook. And it just sort of went viral. It was crazy to see how many times it was shared. I think it got to 50,000. It's probably up around 150,000 now. And just, it really snowballed. And before we knew it, we were being sent photos of blue trees from Queensland and New South Wales, of people coming together and painting their own blue trees, whether it was because they had struggled in the past with depression and had got through, and it was a symbol of hope, or in memory of someone that they had also lost.
Wow, that's incredible. You started out in journalism, so how did that influence, in some part, like the urgency to create visibility around this issue of mental health?
So I wasn't in journalism so much as video. So I was video editing at Channel 7, and that sort of came about as a bit of an opportunity that opened up that I wouldn't have expected to land in, essentially. And I think with a bit of common sense and training up, I was at 7 as part of the news team, cutting the stories for 3 years. I loved it there. The atmosphere was amazing. And I guess it sort of being on the other side and being a part of that helped me piece together, I guess, the aesthetics and the stories and the photos that people were sending in, and sharing that on our socials as well.
And what do you think about the role of media in changing that story for the Blue Tree Project and the power of social media?
Yeah, so I guess we've been quite lucky in that Today Tonight did a story on Blue Tree Project. So the broadcast audience for that is amazing, and helping raise awareness and sort of educating people on our project, but also just encouraging people to speak up if they are struggling, knowing that they're not alone and people really do care.
So what are the next steps for you? Once someone's painted a tree blue from a Rotary Club to like a local PCYC, what happens in the community, or what do you see happening?
Yeah, so lots of people get in touch with us saying really wanting to paint a tree, not really sure how to go about it. And yeah, we've developed these packs essentially that help people with a DIY guide on how to paint a tree, and whether you want to include a fundraising aspect or if it's like a sporting match that you then paint the tree after. So there's so many ways people have been getting involved, and so many age groups as well. And we're finding that the communities are coming together, painting this tree, and it just opens up so many conversations. People who have struggled or are struggling, and just knowing that they're not the only ones feeling that, and sort of creating a community space that feels a lot more comfortable to, have these open, raw conversations that are so needed. So the ongoing effect within the communities has we've had a really big impact on sort of changing the face of mental health, particularly in, I think, the regional and rural areas in WA where many of the trees have been painted.
Yeah, it is beautiful, and it's such a striking imagery to see it against like a stark Australian landscape, to see this beautiful blue tree out there. I think it's really engaging with people, and it's in your face, but it's also really poetic, I find, when I've seen them. So you've grown up in the country, and it may be surprising to some listeners out there that mortality rates are incredibly high or disproportionately high. What's it like firsthand? I mean, what did you experience in terms of your childhood? Yeah,
so I guess in the country, the communities are quite isolated, but they're also quite strong. So very supportive communities. I don't know what our family would have done if we didn't have our close-knit community looking after us after losing Jaden. So, it's been amazing in that sense. But I think the lifestyle that goes with living out in the country, and many farmers, it's a very isolating job, and the extra pressures now with the climate and how that impacts the lifestyle and the living of people out there. I think those added stress causes a lot of issues in terms of mental health and people feeling like there's no escape. So, the rate of suicide in our regional areas is horrific. And I think it's also because there's not the access to the resources that are needed. So it does make it very difficult if you are having to travel quite some way to access services. We're quite lucky in Muckenbuden that we do have a wonderful GP, 2 GPs that have been helping so many people with mental health after losing Jaden, and sort of, I think the project's opened up a lot of conversations and people feeling like they can go to the GP and talk and sort of work out what the plan is ahead. So, it's tough. It's tough living in the country, yeah.
Yeah, you talked about a few different things. So the lack of, essential services for people that really might be struggling. Is there access to counselling or psychologists as well in some of these country towns?
So generally in the bigger town centres there are psychologists and therapists that you can sort of access. A lot of stress is definitely put on the doctors and the GPs, and they will generally sort of help you initially, but if it's a long-term sort of road ahead, which it generally is, you'll probably have to do a bit of travelling to those bigger centres and even to Perth as well, which can be quite a distance for some people and maybe sometimes just not manageable at all. I guess we're quite lucky now in the services that can also be provided through internet. So there's some fantastic forums online, just conversing with people that are going through the same things, just knowing that there are people there to look out for you, but also the text line. So I know some people find it really hard to pick up the phone and make a call, but having that text line, it's sort of a bit more distant, so they feel more comfortable in sort of making the first steps, and then I think Lifeline shared a statistic that 45% of people said they wouldn't have contacted Lifeline if it wasn't for that tech service. So I think there are other avenues opening up in helping people seek the support that they do need. And in so many instances, you really don't have to be a professional to help people. Just being there for your friends and your family and, just touching base with people who, you know, are going through a bit of a rough time can just make all the difference. So, sometimes someone just needs someone to listen to them.
Absolutely. And that is such a beautiful thing that you guys have been able to inspire with people, because it's not just about raising awareness, but it's also bringing people together through that act of painting a tree. So you talked about like country towns having that real sense of community, but I think you're doing that even in metropolitan areas and amongst schools. So that's wonderful. You also mentioned a little bit about climate change and how that can affect people. What do you think is happening out in those country spaces? Yeah,
so I think there's just so many variables that go into farming, and as we've seen, it's been quite a treacherous summer. It's just very dry, it's very hard on the landscape and the animals, and providing the necessary water and feed to make sure we're looking after them. And we pride ourselves on looking after our livestock and looking after our country, because, it's so special, and it's really hard when you see everyone going through such difficult times, whether it's flooding or the horrific fires that we've seen. So I think it's just that uncertainty that creates quite a lot of stress, particularly within these farming lifestyles, that's for sure.
So there's a lot of people that might have suicidal ideation and they think that their life isn't worth living, and then there are others that go on to act on it. How do you think we can engage with people about those internal dialogues?
Yeah, it's very difficult, that's for sure. I think once you get into that dark place, trying to find your own way out of it is very difficult if you're not sure who to turn to. Especially those who don't have support networks. So it's generally a lot of isolation can lead to that. And I think that's partially what sort of led my brother, I think, to take his own life in the end, which is just really horrific. Working for yourself and living by yourself. He was in Sydney at the time and leading his stressful entrepreneur life. And I think it's a really hard question. I don't think there's ever one solution, but I know one thing that I would like to dedicate a lot of time towards in the future is education. I think with kids it's really starting from a young age to reduce that stigma and equip them with the mental tools, how to look after themselves, but also how to recognise in other people if your friends aren't quite themselves. So we all have a role to play in this mental health space, that's for sure. It's very difficult.
I think there's lots of stats about like that technology can also bring us together. You're saying about it being used in like counselling, support services, GP, but in the other way it can also sometimes disengage people because we're not getting that same mental feedback from like strengths of really, powerful face-to-face relationships and interactions. So I think there's a lot that we could do to try and create more important pathways for people just to get back out there into community and to engage with one another and do the things that we kind of used to do that we're not doing so much with tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was really shocked to learn that although people might be aware that youth suicide is a big issue, especially in rural areas, that 2/3 of all farmers are actually over the age of 55 that commit suicide. So why do you think that is in terms of the older representation?
Yeah, I think it comes down to some of the things that I mentioned earlier within those farming communities, the added stress of looking after a family and running a farm and some of the financial stresses that go into that. And the isolating aspect. I mean, you can spend like 12 hours a day by yourself, and if you're working like 6 days a week, yeah, it's very detrimental for your mental health, that's for sure, because you're not having those interactions with people, which are really essential, that's for sure.
How do you see Aboriginal people feeling in rural and remote areas? Have you found that they've engaged with the Blue Tree Project, or what's the feedback been from communities?
Yeah, so we've had lots of remote communities actually get involved. It's been really wonderful to see them using their own language as well for the signage, asking, "Are you okay?" And we've had Leonora and Laverton and also Broome sort of bring their communities together in some of their youth workshop. I think it's like a youth centre as well. They've had murals commissioned and bringing everyone together to help paint. So, I think our project has given a way for a hands-on, get your hands dirty sort of activity that people really love, and has helped bring a lot of the Indigenous communities together. It's been really beautiful to see that. Yeah.
And there's a lot of power as well in just like art as therapy, isn't there? Yeah, just
absolutely.
Painting something. I know even when I'm painting my house, I kind of get like a bit of a therapeutic buzz of it, but not if I had to paint the whole thing probably. So you guys as the Blue Tree Project kind of sit in that cause awareness space, and how do you see the interplay between charities that are doing things to do with cause awareness and those that are actually on the front line in providing services? How do you guys link up between organisations such as Lifeline you mentioned or Beyond Blue?
Yeah, so initially when everything was sort of taking off a Blue Tree Project, we had lots of people wanting to make donations, and we were so grateful that our project had captured that attention of that the space needed. So we actually created a page where we directed all our funds to Beyond Blue. I think we donated about 30,000 to them, and then
that's incredible.
20,000 to Lifeline, because we just feel they're on the front line of mental health, particularly Lifeline. I've visited the headquarters here in Perth and seen the call centre, and just have so much respect for what they're doing and answering those calls, and the desperate people on the other lines that just need someone to be there for them. So we are very lucky, I suppose, in a way that we have this eye-capturing project that brings lots of people together, but we don't see, it's all very well raising awareness, but if these people aren't getting the help that they need, then there's no point. So we have actually sort of been working with Lifeline, talking about how we can sort of work together. Say we're activating a space like at the Royal Show this year. We'll be hopefully getting Lifeline volunteers to come, and so if people do sort of start opening up, or maybe feel like they want to talk to someone, Lifeline's sort of there as a friendly face, and they can seek help if they need. And we'll have flyers and pamphlets for anyone who might want to know a little bit more information about how they can get some extra support if they're going through a tough time. Sometimes it can be temporary and you just need a little bit of help being lifted out of it. So, it certainly shouldn't be a life sentence, mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned just how eye-catching the Blue Tree Project's been. What do you say to other charities that are out there that are probably at the front line, but they're lacking innovative ways to engage the public about issues that are really important? I mean, you spoke a little bit about how social media was so powerful in something that started off as just a tribute or a memorial or a lovely homage to your brother. And now it's become its own thing, and I'm sure he'd be so proud of you. But what would you say to people that are out there doing things and they're not capturing anyone's imagination or attention? Yeah,
so I think funding probably comes into a huge aspect of that. I know Lifeline use every cent they can, making sure that they're having the impact where it's going to make a difference to people's lives. And I think that's why it's so important for us, because we want to make sure that we are having an impact. We're not just here posting pretty pictures, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are helping people. So that's why we're definitely working with Lifeline in that sense. I think we're very lucky that we get these beautiful eye-capturing photos. And so I think there's lots of people don't have that content creation ability with their services. But in saying that, there are other campaigns like Are You OK Day that people are very familiar with. The marketing is fantastic there, and we all know it when it's Are You OK Day. They take over the city and paint everything yellow essentially, and so
there's a lot of storytelling going on though, isn't there, that you're able to tell those stories and captivate those communities really well. I think that's incredible. What do you see as the role of media to change lives for communities?
Social media?
Yeah. Social media.
I think the reach on social media is like none other, and I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with social media because I myself am making a very conscious effort not to spend so much time on my phone, but then at the same time it's where our audience has just grown, and it's all organic, which is what is so beautiful. Our following on Instagram now is, and also Facebook mostly, is quite incredible just how many people obviously resonates with, and they want to keep seeing these photos and seeing and hearing these stories. So the power to spread the message and those powerful stories is definitely been helped through social media without a doubt. Yeah.
And it's a picture, but a picture tells 1,000 words, isn't it? Because there's a backstory behind every tree.
Absolutely.
There's a number of people involved, there's a lot of communities, and it's just sparking that dialogue, because we've all got a bit of a short attention span, isn't it? Which is why I think Instagram, we kind of troll through feeds so quickly. And so it's beautiful to see something that eye-catching. We maybe didn't talk about this before, but do you think that this project would have taken off if it wasn't in Australia? Because it's such a stark and beautifully resonating image about that, like I said, that really sometimes barren landscape, and then that that barren tree, but beautiful and, illuminated. Do you think that in Australia it could have had that?
Maybe, but I think I might be a little bit biased, but I think Australians are very special in that we have a passion for helping people as well. So I think, it's just hopped from one town to the next, and I think that stark landscape, seeing the blue tree, and some are in very isolating spots where it's almost like no matter where you are, there's always someone who cares about you. It's a very powerful message, and I think that's why it has swept across Australia. We're seeing over 450 trees that we know of, but the truck drivers tell us there's far more than that as they've travelled around the country. But there's also a couple in the US now, one in Germany, and so they're popping up all over the place in the UK as well. So
Oh, that must be so rewarding to hear about that. But there's something about that Australian dialectic, that sort of blokey, she'll be right, kind of stoic masculine attitude that I think plays a little bit into the dialogue. And how do you see that in terms of the impact that the Blue Tree Project's been able to have?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of comes back to the high rates of suicide in the older men that we see. I think that plays a role in, it's almost this generational thing, showing emotion and speaking up very openly about struggling or how you're not coping with certain aspects of life. And I think we are seeing a shift. Just being out in the communities and events that I've been a part of, I am noticing a really big shift in the younger males being a lot more open and willing to be a lot more vulnerable that you don't see as often in the older generations. However, in saying that, after speaking at some events, I have people come up to me who have actually been mostly older males saying thank you so much for sharing that. I think we really needed to hear that. So I think it is in the back of their mind. They're just processing it in their own way. But I think it's definitely changing, and I'm so glad to see that. It is potentially there slightly, but the fact that we are seeing a change gives a lot of hope for the future, and the younger ones as they come up and become educated also.
I know, and when we call something out, when we name it and we bring it to the forefront of people's minds, it gives people space to also talk about these things, because I've always found it really interesting, or maybe because my mum's a psychologist, but that people don't view mental health the same way they view overall physical health. And I still think that there's a lot of things that we can do to really empower just that front line of GPs and services in like reaching people and allowing them the capacity and the space to talk about things, either with a professional or with their mates, or with their local clubs, and getting back out there. Since starting the Blue Tree Project, what was your biggest roadblock, and how have you managed to overcome it?
I guess the biggest roadblock for me personally was only having 24 hours in a day at a time when I was studying, working full-time and trying to start the project. Well, the project sort of just blew up, and it was managing that and how we could make the most impact and make that all work. So that was a huge time when I was juggling. I am not studying anymore. I've put that on hold, and I've actually left my job to take on Blue Tree Project full-time so that I can do it properly.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. So that was a big roadblock for me, and working through that and just keeping life's balance then was near impossible, and I just felt so ridiculous because you have to practice what you're preaching. So, that was a big one. But I also think some of our biggest roadblocks are to come as we sort of find our way and wade our way through the mental health space, and how we can have the most impact and who we can collaborate and sort of partner with. I think that's, as a small not-for-profit, it's a very competitive sort of area, and I think developing those relationships will be quite difficult moving forward, but I think we're on the right track. But yeah,
it's amazing. I think you touched upon like the founder's journey and like the ups and downs it goes through starting something, especially from your passion, but definitely with social enterprise it's probably even harder because you're on like a tight resource budget. How have you managed to like help, like ask your networks for help, or how do you get support for yourself?
Yeah, so in terms of resources, obviously living in the real world, for me, I've been working for a whole year without pay, essentially. So that is a huge struggle that I've taken upon myself to make the project work. And in terms of, I've definitely been reaching out to my contacts, but also I was quite lucky in the sense with being a finalist for the West Australian of the Year award. I think it opened up a lot of doors and opportunities and that extra exposure that I then sort of, I took hold of that and I sort of just ran with it, and it was all full steam ahead from there. And I think just attending more events and one door leads to another, and I've not been fumbling my way through, but I've certainly, just taking it one step at a time. And something I've learnt that I need to get better at is asking people. There's no shame in asking people for help, and asking that help of people who you haven't maybe spoken to in a long time. They've always been so willing to help, and I think that's something that I'm definitely learning.
Well, it's just like burnout is a real thing, and definitely I know what it's like not having a paycheck for a year, but it's important, I think, and especially because we're talking about mental health, like for anyone that's starting something out there and wanting to do something that they're passionate about or they've had some life experience with and they're wanting to make a change in the world, to really look after themselves, because it can be a real roller coaster of a ride, and you get the high highs and you get the low lows as well. But you're about to do the Rottnest swim. That's a pretty incredible challenge.
So I've decided to take on that challenge. In fact, it was my girlfriends that asked me if I wanted to join because they wanted to do it for Blue Tree Project, and I was like, well, now I have to. Luckily, I actually enjoy swimming, so I thought I would, take on the challenge. I think it was sort of one of those bucket list things, but I was always too scared to attempt it because I was worried about failing, and that's just a terrible outlook. And so what was the worst that happens? I don't make it. So, coming to terms with that in general in life, just be willing to fail. Like, success is only through fail, really. I've also been trying to make sure I'm keeping a balance and practicing what I'm preaching. I have decided that I can't work from home because of the emotional ties of the project and running that and the personal roots that it has. I think it's really important for me not to be like working at home alone, crossing those boundaries. I'll just put a bit of washing on now, or I'll just put a slow cooked meal on. Like, it's really bad. So Space Cubed, working out of here, is fantastic and has helped a lot in compartmentalising my life, which I think helps with my clarity.
In Perth, in WA, in Western Australia, there's a great startup ecosystem such as Space Cubed and Flux, and they're really interested in assisting cause-based organisations that are generating impact. What's it like to work in that space?
Yeah, it's a real sort of privilege, I think, to be given the opportunity to work out of Space Cubed, because the resources that are here alone, but also the people that I've been able to meet have been life-changing, really. I've met some really inspirational people and connections in helping link to other organisations that have been very helpful. So it's a very worthwhile area to be a part of, and the ecosystem in Perth is quite special, and particularly within that not-for-profit space as well. I think we're all there to help each other, which is a really nice atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. I recently found out that Wattle, which is a paint company, a large paint company, has partnered with you or named a colour after your project. What was that like?
Yeah, it was really special when they reached out to us and sort of asked how they could get involved. And we have the paint colour that is now named after us. So that was the original sort of blue that my brother used to paint the tree on the farm. And so now when people ask what colour the paint is, we can just tell them it's blue tree. So that was really special. And they're also being fantastic coming on board and actually supplying paint for us for events as well. So because paint's not cheap. So it's very helpful in just helping communities that maybe can't afford to buy the paint as well. So it's awesome.
Oh, great. In your wildest dreams, sort of like 10 years from now, where do you see the Blue Tree Project and what do you see it doing?
It's funny you ask this question because I've written here that this year is my personal growth year and I have to come up with this big dream. So I think at the moment I'm feeling very constrained as a not-for-profit by looking at my bank account, which seems so silly because that's not all I have to work with. But I think I have this tunnel vision of making sure I'm having the biggest impact possible, and then I'm not dreaming big enough about doing something like Lachlan, who wants to fill Marvel Stadium with 50,000 men for mental health. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. I want a big dream like that. So I'm actually working on that at the moment. 10 years time, I hope that we can work towards the zero target for suicide, and I hope we'll be a lot closer to that. So I know that's a goal that's been set up by the Australian government, and I want to do everything I can to be working on that so no other family has to go through what we are.
That's beautiful, Kendall. Yeah, and I think it's really important to dream those big dreams because you're getting there, you're actually working towards it, so it's really inspiring. Just to wrap up, how can others who are listening on the Difference podcast get involved with the Blue Tree Project?
Yeah, so if you want to read a bit more about it, you can obviously visit our website, and I've done quite a lot of development on there, and having a how to get involved page is a few different avenues, whether it's you just getting your mates together and painting a tree somewhere, a fundraising aspect, donation, or you can even champion our cause with our merch that we've got, and that all goes towards facilitating community painting days and getting out and making sure that we're making a difference, and developing that education program for every school to get involved with a blue tree somehow as well. Yeah.
That's amazing. And what can we do personally in our lives to put the message out there that it's okay to not be okay?
I think the biggest thing is being so honest and real, and having those conversations openly with people just shows them that they can do it as well. So I think, like on Instagram, some of the people that I follow that I'm so inspired by, the rawest, realest people who just expose themselves. And I think that's so important. It's just being really open about how we're feeling and our emotions, and I think it empowers other people to do the same, and hopefully we'll have a ripple effect, and before we know it, we'll have everyone being a lot more open-minded with mental health.
Great. Who do you follow on Instagram that you would recommend for someone that's out there listening?
So I think
I really like Matt Z. Haig. Have you seen a lot of his stuff that's about suicide? Yeah. No. It's amazing.
I'll have to have a look.
Yeah, I'll hook you up with that.
But Dylan Alcott, I think he's brilliant as well, like just embracing his life. And I think Libby Trickett was another star. She's sort of a new mum, and she's so open about the struggles of becoming a new mum, and just like, it's not pretty Instagram worthy pictures. It's just like what real life actually is. And I just admire that so much. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thank you, Kendall, for being on the show and for raising the stigma, inspiring others to get out there and change the world, and also breaking the silence on mental health, that it's okay to not be okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
To date, the Blue Tree Project's been responsible for people forming communities, getting out into their own backyard, getting messy, and sparking a dialogue about some of the unspeakables in society and talking about mental health. Thanks to Kendall, over 450 trees have been painted, and people are now starting to talk about their feelings and about mental health. I was just so particularly inspired how Kendall used her own life circumstances to raise awareness about something that she cares about and that she's passionate about, and how something as little as painting a tree blue has now taken off by wildfire and affected thousands of people's lives, and really stimulated a conversation that we really need to have in this country for both young people, old people, people in the community. You can keep up to date with all the current projects by following @Blue Tree Project on Instagram, Facebook, and get involved in perhaps running your own fundraiser, painting a tree or donating. And if you want to do that, head to bluetreeproject.com.au. And if you stumble upon a blue tree, you can also take a photo and help spread the awareness of mental health.